All right. Can y'all see what we're putting up here?
Yeah, Mike, you're killing it today.
The date's wrong on that. So let's jump right in because the topic's right. All right. Quick intro. Today we kind of put aside some time to talk about Microsoft Community Docs. So this is something that's near and dear to our heart. Today we're going to feature Mark's had a lot to do with Community Docs in general, and I think Emily, you're probably going to have a lot from what we called the buy side and the sell side, right? So there's people who are contributing these, and there's people like, why would I use these? How would I use these? So let's jump into what is this thing, right? So what is Community Docs? How does it work? And then we'll touch on how I might contribute to this repository and how I might benefit from it as a lurker or a consumer. So this is really where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. And I think since Mark has been so instrumental in getting Community Docs off the ground, I'll hand it over to Mark, and Mark can give us a little overview and a demo of how Community Docs works and what some of the value is here.
All righty. So the idea is one that Vesa Juonen and I started talking about a year and a half ago, maybe, which feels like a long time. But the thought is that we have Microsoft especially has a lot of documentation for developers. I mean, that's where they have more than anything. And then they have a lot of documentation for end users and certainly admins as well. And there's this space in the middle. There's this place that I've always been very interested in, where citizen developers, power users, site owners, people who actually need to make the platform do something for themselves sit, and they always want to be able to do the best work that they can and solve problems the best way. So we started thinking about building up a repo of documentation that's generated by the community instead of by Microsoft. And the benefit of that is when people outside Microsoft think about how they're solving problems, it's not always what Microsoft thinks. Sometimes it's unique combinations of services or applications used in a way that's a little bit different than what Microsoft expected. I think we all use lists and libraries in ways even then that's sometimes different than what Microsoft thinks we're doing. So the goal is to have community contributions, community sort of vetting of the content. Obviously, a lot of people in any open source effort like this will be consumers, so people obviously should be able to get some benefit out of it. But we also want feedback. We want updates to these articles based on what people know and what they find when they're reading that may or may not sit perfectly with them, so that every article just keeps getting better and better. Microsoft has done this with the docs, docs.microsoft.com platform. Most of the articles that are there are also editable through GitHub as an open source, or at least an open docs kind of concept. But this repo is a little different in that we're going to be generating all of this content as users or as people from the community. And I'll do a quick demo, which I have to do this for. Hopefully that's showing my screen now. So do I have a yay?
Yes.
Yay!
Yay! Right.
I knew this was going to be popular. So the Microsoft community content, which you can always get to at aka.ms/m365 community docs, if I can type. I want to bookmark that, and then we have that at the end of our slides. So that will take you to this particular page. And what this does is sort of showcase the articles that we want to promote, things that are either recently added or frequently read. And so these boxes on the front will highlight those things. And we've got them sort of bucketed into some groups based on how the content has been coming in. We didn't decide that this was the outline and then ask people to write particular things. People are contributing articles that seem to sort of fit into these buckets. So everything from very simple ideas like, what does a particular term mean, which is one of my own little pet peeves. People say things like camel and they have no idea what camel means or what it is. So we're sort of demystifying some of the acronyms and things like that, to much more complex or deep dive things like, can machine learning be used to assign managed metadata attributes for items? So this is a much more specific article giving some thinking from Beth Hall about how you might think about sort of automated tagging of content. So it's a real mix of content from levels of complexity and focus. But the goals here are to give people things like better practices. And I never say best practices anymore. I say better practices, because we're consultants and we know everything depends. Making better decisions. So if you have a choice between doing things in a few ways, hopefully there's some articles here that can help you make those decisions based on a set of criteria. Some scenario-based things like what are some scenarios that we can think through as we're thinking about using lists and libraries in our environment, things like that. Now, behind all of this is where everything gets published. But behind all of this is a GitHub site at Microsoft-365-community, where the articles are actually contributed by the community and then approved or edited. We sort of pass it through a little bit of an editing filter so that we at least catch the spelling mistakes and stuff. And then these things are pushed into that docs.microsoft.com repo about once a week. So in this GitHub repo, you have some links that explain how you can contribute, what you can do, trying to make it as simple as possible, because we understand that people who write articles like this are probably not people who use GitHub very often, and we don't want that to be the barrier. If you have questions and you don't know how to do something and you want to contribute, the best thing that you can do, at least the easiest thing you can do, is ask a question. Get started. So it's an issue, question, a new issue, and then get started. And just ask your question. Make a suggestion. If you think that there should be an article about something, ask a question about how you could contribute. Ask a question about how GitHub works, whatever. And we'll try and get back to you and make it easier for you to be a contributor. So I'm gonna take a breath and stop and open it up for a little more discussion amongst the team. I think that I've sort of shown the bigger components of this thing. Actually, one last thing I'll mention is that we do have a Twitter account, M365ComDocs, if you'd like to follow that and see what's going on. I'm surprised that the latest retweet isn't there, but oh, there it is. And if you want to sort of keep track of what articles are showing up and things like that, we'll be tweeting out, what new articles have been contributed, whether they've been updated to some things. There also are announcements on the P&P calls, with credit given to the people who have been contributors and what's changed, so that you can sort of keep track of the movement of the whole repo. Now I'm going to pause. Into a deafening silence.
So Mark, we'll have two links in the follow-on slides, one for this Twitter account, twitter.com/M365ComDocs, and to go to community docs directly from there. But let's maybe go back a step and say, and I want to kind of quiz Emily a little bit on this, because as a business analyst and a site builder, I think Emily probably has some more experience on the buy side. Like, why would I go to community docs? What sort of information can I find there, and why would I do it as a site builder?
Absolutely. So I think what is my favorite part about the Microsoft 365 community content is that gap that Mark was talking about earlier. while I can go to things like docs.microsoft.com and support.microsoft.com to figure out what the platform can do, sometimes you're really looking for the why or the how. And it takes a bit when you're newer to the community to learn about the different leaders in the community who have the independent blogs and are answering these questions. So to have all of these people in the community contributing to this centralized repository makes it really easy to be a one-stop shop to dive into that content and start to explore. And Microsoft 365 is incredibly complex and large. So you're not going to be an expert on every single aspect of it all the time. So to know that there's a place that you can go and learn what other people have done who are also platform owners and on the front end using all of these solutions, it can be really helpful. So you're starting out with, again, those better practices, some lessons learned of what other people have already done. And to Mark's point, sometimes you're doing something a little bit different than necessarily the product team's going to talk about it. So you have some different perspectives of how you can use these solutions as well.
And Emily, you've written a couple of articles for the repo that I think, fall well into that category of, Microsoft isn't necessarily going to write this stuff. You wrote about identifying your SharePoint champions and empowering them. And that's based on your experience working inside an organization and having to go through that process, as opposed to someone in Redmond who does market research and sort of finds out how people might go about it. It's a more sort of direct way of thinking about it, right?
Absolutely. And I think, especially with self-service, right, that's not something you're necessarily going to find a lot of Microsoft documents about, but we can share some of the things that I had gone through as a platform owner of how I actually was able to navigate throughout the business, right? Because Microsoft isn't going to talk about the business side of it as much. Another thing that the community docs can be used for that's really helpful is getting buy-in in your organization. So I know as a former platform owner, sometimes I would present an idea and I didn't have necessarily external data to back it up. It's something that I'd gone and heard about at a conference. Maybe people didn't have, the leaders I was pitching this to didn't have access to it. So to have this whole repository of these better practices of people, things that other people have done that I can easily share across the organization can give those leaders a little bit more of that information and help build confidence in other people have done this. This is the way that I recommend we go as well.
So Mark and Emily, who's the user? So like obviously the site builder is a user. Is the IT pro? Is there IT pro content out here? Is there developer content, or are there different communities that you would direct people to for those things?
Well, I think the intent here is definitely to sort of fill in that middle space, or try to create at least a critical mass in that middle space. Todd, as an IT pro, not that we like to slap labels on people.
Pigeonhole me, I don't mind. Put me in my place.
Exactly. I'm not sure that this would be a place that you would necessarily come to look for content, though you might find something in a search. We're definitely seeing a lot of organic search result visitors.
Yeah.
What do you think, Todd?
Well, I wanted to mention kind of one of the benefits that you guys didn't bring up yet is that the Microsoft docs are great, and that team, and we know the folks on that team, Pam and some of those other folks. I don't know how they keep that breadth of documentation as current and relevant as they do, as fast as that platform changes. But they are Microsoft employees, and they can't talk about the warts sometimes like we can. And so I like some of these initiatives because not only can we give a perspective that Microsoft doesn't have, but we can maybe be a little more honest about things and how things work and all that. So that's another great benefit from this. Some people don't believe the things that Microsoft say, and they want a little more organic material. And this is
Right.
This scratches that itch well.
It's interesting. I have a weekly meeting with the docs folks, Pam Green and Joanne Hendrickson in the docs team, along with Vesa, and we talk through. We're to be honest, we're threading a needle a little bit here because we can't on my blog I can say whatever the hell I want and I can piss anyone off I want. Try not to do too much of that, but I can. Here we obviously we want it to be something that Microsoft can stand behind. So it's not that we don't say that certain things don't work, or we really recommend not doing it the way Microsoft recommends, or something like that. I mean, if you go through these articles, you'll find a little bit about that. But it really needs to be in the context of what works well. And we're also not trying to replace any of Microsoft's documentation. And in fact, sometimes one of the things that people do when they go into the repo is make article suggestions. And those docs folks watch those. And sometimes it's, well, you know, we actually have 3 articles about this already. And so we don't necessarily write that one. Or we write something that actually combines what those 3 articles are all about with an extra spin. So again, we're not trying to usurp anything. We're trying to help that audience that sort of sits in an odd place. You know, the people, citizen developers are a great example. You know, people who want to wring every little bit about out of the platform that they can, but aren't always sure how they can do it. You know, the people who sit inside a department who are those SharePoint champions or Office 365 champions and want to just be smarter. One of the things that we're starting to do some work on is Sadie Van Buren had a great concept back in the early part of the last decade around the SharePoint maturity model, and we're gonna start sort of coming up with ways to take those ideas and turn them into Microsoft 365 maturity model. You know, if you're using the tools this way, you're probably at this level. Would you like to get to the next level? Here are some of the things that you can think about. You know, what level should you be at? And if you aren't familiar with the capability maturity model ideas, if you Google capability maturity model or CMM, you'll see what some of those ideas are. So watch for some of that content to become coming through here too. So not just ways to do things, but also ways to think about how you can get better at doing things, or gauge how you do things against the broader community can also be useful.
Mark, could I ask? I want to ask the non-Sympraxis folks on the call, because this is an opportunity for us to listen a bit, I think, too. At Sympraxis, I think we've got religion around this, right? We're huge devotees of it, which really, it's important to us. We live it, we breathe it every day. How do we get it to not be such a well-kept secret? Like, it's a really great resource. I think we want to do our part to promote it. We want to encourage others to promote it. I'm curious if Ruth, if Shelley, if Mark, if others on the call have some thoughts about what are some ways to get this out there more broadly and promote this, because we think it's great. We believe in it. Not to put you all on the spot or anything, but put you on the spot. And Shelley, don't tell me you don't have an opinion about this.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, well, I just followed your Twitter feed, because I think that getting those kinds of updates about what's going on and what you're looking for is a way that you can more dynamically interact and solicit people's opinions about it. I think that, you know, as a consumer, I agree with the comment that was made about it being a little bit more human than some of the Microsoft stuff. And I think that it is a little bit more for the people who are power, you know, it's more easily digested for the power users. So there are parts of this where I think that I can take that content and make use of it. One of my sensitivities around it is understanding a little bit better, you know, the sort of fair use, giving credit, cannibalizing pieces of it to use within our own organization. One of the problems that I see in the Microsoft documentation is sometimes that they suggest doing things that we actually don't want our user community to be doing. And so we don't want to use learning pathways because it opens up doorways to them doing stuff that we can't support at the moment. So cannibalizing articles, whether it's from Learning Pathways content or whether it's from this, is appealing. But again, I want to make sure that I'm not plagiarizing. And I know that the stuff I think I know that the stuff isn't copyrighted, but it's a matter of honor as well.
Well, this just like any other open source repository, this stuff is absolutely in the public domain. It's got, I believe, the MIT license on it, so you can take it and do whatever you'd like with it. The goal here is, it's the rising tide floats all boats concept. It's not proprietary in any way whatsoever, and I don't think that that's even different than a lot of the Microsoft documentation. But because this is community generated, there are really no constraints on it. And in fact, I mean, I would love to see people who have blog posts that get a lot of traffic that covers an interesting concept, and I'm sort of poking people out there in the community when I see them publish something, and repurpose it, or just publish it here as well, because this, I think, gives content a lot longer tail. And when we write something on our own blog, we usually write it and we just never really visit it again, unless you're Laura Kokorinen, because she continues to expand things into massively useful posts. But let's get some content that the community already uses frequently and get it in here as well. So again, very much an open book, very much use it in any way that you want to. Take it and adapt it, take it and use it verbatim is absolutely fine.
I can speak to the Microsoft Docs, obviously, support.office.com and docs.microsoft.com. As Mark just mentioned, that content is open to be used how you need to use it in your organization. So if that means you take sections of it and build your own sort of version, that is absolutely doable. Like that is their intent.
I do think that putting in a line, though, when you do that says adapted from and pointing them back to the source where possible is a way that you can encourage people who are consumers to drive people back into the site so they can explore new topics.
Right. Mike, I don't know if you want to go to one of those articles if you happen to be able to pull it up. At the bottom of each one of the articles, we do encourage the person who originally submits it to there's a line down there in the template that says principal author, and we put a link to the person's LinkedIn profile. So we've sort of gone back and forth about how much do we put about that first person, because if you think about it, these articles ought to evolve. They ought to become not that person's article anymore, because additional people are making contributions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, we want to give credit where credit is due. Linking back to the original after that evolution happens might actually be counterproductive, because hopefully we'll be able to keep these things current and updated based on what changes, where the original might not actually get that attention. But fair points. I think I keep thinking we're going to get to that critical mass where there are going to be so many contributions we won't be able to handle them, and we're just not quite there yet. But we're getting regular contributions where we weren't before, so it's very encouraging.
And that point of contributions too, right? We are talking about it a lot about authors, but you can contribute in a bunch of different ways, as Mark pointed out in his demo, where you can ask for topics, ask questions. You can also put in comments and provide feedback, or ask for more and share some of your experiences. You don't just have to be a principal author to be involved in this initiative.
Right.
I think that's important, Emily, because I think a lot of people feel like, hey, there's 100 people who know more about this than I do. I'm not going to put something out there and put myself out there just to be told how wrong I am by the community. And I think a way to dip your toe in the water and get over that a little bit is to make requests, to say, hey, I'm really interested in this topic. Does anybody else want to collaborate on this? Does anybody else want to work on this together? I've got a crappy first draft. I know there's some experts on here who can refine it and make it way better. How can I help? I think that's a really great way to get over the I'm not worthy.
Yeah, and we're more than happy to hook people together so that they can collaborate on things, even if they don't know each other. We have a bunch of people who have contributed multiple articles, and they sort of know the drill, and they would be more than happy to help somebody who has the germ of an idea. I think in monitoring all of the feedback and comments that we get back, I can tell you there have been zero "this is wrong" and "you're an idiot." There have been a few corrections, like, I really think it's more like this. and it's been very constructive, and those updates have made the articles better. So, the I'm not worthy thing is, that sort of feeling of insecurity that, I have and lots of other people have, maybe all of us.
We all have. I was just going to say, I think we all have it.
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, yeah.
Call it. I write an article and then I wonder if it's any good. And I go read it later and I think it's horrible because I've learned since then. But the good thing about it is, because the community is learning as we're going, these articles ought to also improve over time. And, as better practices change, or we have new capabilities that we can talk about, or additional ways that we can think about things.
Yeah.
And I will say for me, sorry, go ahead, Todd.
I see it. Okay. I struggle with that a lot, the imposter syndrome and all that. And somebody mentioned to me that to be valuable, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to know the one thing that the person was looking for when they read your document. And I think we've all been that person. We've all been at a session at a conference and sat through a 90-minute session and one thing stuck out of that and like, oh my God, that's great. Or read a blog post and there was one thing that came up. That's all you need to contribute for somebody to think you're a hero when you write something like this. You don't need to exhaustively know the content. You just got to give them a little bit of value.
And be passionate about it. Actually feel something about that topic. That's what really shines through in a lot of these articles. It's not necessarily that the person who wrote it knows everything about that topic, but they feel really strongly about parts of it, and that comes through in the writing. I think some of it is really excellent content.
And then I'd say the other piece of that too, just to close that out, is part your confidence with writing, but also as a non-dev, the second that I heard it was GitHub, I was like, okay, not for me. But the truth is there's a really awesome sharing is caring initiative where they give you a training, they clone the repo, they walk through you doing it together. So you get live experience doing it before you're actually going to be doing some submissions. So I highly, highly recommend joining that. And that made me a lot more confident in being able to technically contribute to this repo.
I'm actually talking to David and Hugo, who run some of that effort this afternoon, about doing some sessions around this repo. So hopefully we'll be able to, in the P&P realm, we're always trying to sort of knit things together in ways that's going to make people more productive.
Yeah, I think I would maybe want to point out too that if anybody was actually rude and told somebody they were an idiot, that would not be tolerated for a hot second. Like that behavior is not okay. So,
No. And it's funny, this kind of realm doesn't seem to attract that trolliness.
Yeah.
The same way that some other platforms do. I think people respect the effort that goes into writing these things, and they're more likely to make a constructive comment or a suggestion.
We're close on time. I wanted to make sure we put forth a couple of. Man, my machine's real slow. A couple of resources and takeaways. The link to Community Docs and the Community Docs Twitter account is on there. Emily, I did not get the sharing is caring link into this in time. So if you want to throw it in the chat or give it to me after the fact, we'll push it out to folks.
You got it, getting it now.
Yep. So in 2 weeks' time, we got a new topic on planning your move from classic to modern, and that can take a lot of different. There's a lot of different facets of that. So we'll take plenty of feedback, questions, ideas from you about areas within that big classic to modern move on which to focus. And we've got a couple of upcoming events. Probably should have put dates on these. Galactic Summit, Mark and Julie, that's next week.
Yeah,
correct?
June 9th.
Mine actually already happened. Mine was yesterday.
All right.
Yep.
And we just wanted to embarrass you a little bit with the pictures that are on here. The Star Trek.
I love being a red shirt. It's fantastic.
Apparently, in this version of Star Trek, red shirts were the top line.
They were right, yeah, because Picard was a red shirt, so it's a good thing.
I saw the photo and I assumed I was dead.
Just a pawn, right? Just ship you down there to meet with some tribbles.
Yeah,
or
you have to be old school Star Trek to.
Yeah,
there's trouble with those tribbles. You got to watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
I got the badge on my.
But you don't have any collar stuff, and
epaulets.
Rank.
Are there? Could Emily and Derek? Can you put the date for SharePoint Saturday Omaha? Can you fill in for folks? What day? What is that?
Sorry, Mike's requires a little pull up because I know they're at different times.
Okay. Yeah, just the day at least. And the SPS Omaha site is linked right from here. So.
Yeah.
Oddly, as the person who lives a 2-hour drive from Omaha, I forgot to submit to that. I won't be.
So my session for OneNote is Tuesday, June 23rd, 9 to 10 a.m. And Derek's is the 22nd at 9 a.m.
Oh, cool. So it's hard. It's not really a SharePoint Saturday. It's a virtual event that's kind of spread out over a little bit of time.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thrilled to kind of, meet us, talk to us, engage us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Any parting words? Mark, I'll defer to you, the OG of Community Docs, to.
And it's, you and I joke about that OG thing. It's half of ogre. It's old guy. It's a bunch of things that come to my mind that aren't the right thing. Well, I would love it if we could have more participation in this repo. So if there's anything that I could do in a conversation, or if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them directly, or on Twitter or whatever. Just to get in touch.
It's awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for your input. Please don't hesitate to submit questions and ideas. You kept it going during the chat. Julie, thanks for moderating that. And we look forward to talking to you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.